Fantasy time here on CBS Sports HQ with the Fantasy Football Today, fellas. Heath, Dave, and Jamey standing by or sitting by with their starts and sits for week 2. Jamey?
Thanks, Chris. We always appreciate those fun intros. Yes, it's our starts and sits for week number 2. We're very excited about this week. And I'm very excited about the start of the week against your Bears, Chris Hassel, because I think we're going to see a much better version of this Lions offense and a much better version of Jared Goff. Last week was just set up for disaster for them. They were going on the road to face a very good Packers defense that, oh, by the way, added Micah Parsons, and facing the opportunity to show what they could do with a new coordinator. It did not look good. It did not look good behind a new offensive line. Those things are probably not going to get fixed. But I like the narrative. I like the narrative of them coming back home after a tough loss. I like the Bears going on the road on a short week. I don't like the fact that Jalen Johnson's probably going to play for the Bears, so that secondary is going to be a little bit better. But I think we saw the worst of Jared Goff, and we'll see a much better version of Goff in this matchup. Are you guys on board with Jared Goff as the start of the week this week?
We know that his kryptonite is pass rush pressure, and the Packers bring a ton of that, and the Bears don't. So I think he's absolutely going to have better protection up front. His receivers will be open further downfield. Hopefully a better game plan. I was going to say play design, but game plan just overall from John Morton in this Lions offense. I think he'll be good.
I don't think we really truly found out last week how much the loss of Ben Johnson, Frank Ragnow really hurts this offense. It hurts them a lot against great defense. This is what we found out. Let's see when they play against a middling defense how much that changes, and let's see how much it helps the Bears having Ben Johnson on their sideline knowing Jared Goff's kryptonite.
A little bit of a revenge narrative there. Revenge narrative also in Pittsburgh, where you get DK Metcalf taking on his former team with the Seahawks. I also like Teteroa McMillan, Travion Henderson, 2 rookies I think showed a little bit in their first game. I think they'll be a little bit better in week number 2. Jalen Warren in that same game for the Steelers, and Drake May should be better last week's start of the week, but taking on a Dolphins defense that couldn't stop Daniel Jones. Come on, Drake May. But in the case of Metcalf, I was relatively impressed last week because facing Sauce Gardner, not the best statistical output, but 4 catches, 83 yards, showed a good connection with Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers looked fantastic, which was most importantly what you wanted to see for DK Metcalf. So taking on the Seahawks, they're going to know him, he's going to know them. There's already a little bit of trash talk going back and forth behind the scenes. I think Metcalf's going to come out and have a very strong game, like him as a high-end number 2 fantasy receiver for week number 2. Dave, let's take a look at your starts for week number 2, and you like a guy that's in a very big spot now for Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, we know he's going to be the number 1 target getter, or at least we think he's going to be the number 1 target getter for the Chiefs. He was last week. 16 targets. Are you kidding me? Now, I think that's the only really good reason to start him, along with this game script. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to run the ball very well against Philadelphia, and I think Philly's going to have a lead. So I would expect Hollywood Brown to get a lot of targets and just fall into production. Don't love him as a top 24 guy. Absolutely see him as somebody that could get 6 or 7 catches, average 10 yards per catch, and be good enough to start if you're in a pinch or if you're in a 3 wide receiver league.
Juwan Johnson, another guy you like as well.
I do. We talked about Kellen Moore's tendencies. Heath brought it up every time we talked about Alvin Kamara. He'll still talk about it because the tendency for Kellen Moore is a low pass rate to running backs. But in 5 of his prior 6 years as a play caller, tight ends saw a target share of at least 20%. Juwan Johnson looks like he's a big-time target for Spencer Rattler. Had an end zone target late in the game last week that would have tied the game. He couldn't hold on to it. I think he's going to continue to see targets for the Saints. I think the Saints beat the 49ers, and I think Juwan Johnson will be a big reason why.
Big part of that, obviously, Brock Purdy not playing for San Francisco. At least that's the expectation, I'm sure, going into your prediction there. Heath, for you like a quarterback coming off a strong game as well in Justin Fields.
Yeah, Justin Fields. We said it coming into the year that he had made marginal improvements as a passer basically every year of his career. He made marginal improvements with his pocket presence, taking fewer sacks. Then he goes up against a Steelers defense in week 1 that we thought was elite, and he just absolutely gashed them. Was on target with almost every throw, did everything we expected as a runner. Now he faces a Bills defense that we just saw what happened to them in primetime against a running quarterback in Lamar Jackson. Field isn't Lamar Jackson, but what he is a top 10 quarterback just about every week. Start him with confidence, and I am starting him over somebody who was a top 3 quarterback last year, Baker Mayfield. It was kind of funny. We talked about Baker Mayfield as a sit, and last year he came out of nowhere and produced this abnormal touchdown rate that virtually even people who like Baker Mayfield said he's going to regress. The touchdowns are coming down. He was not particularly good last week. Only 152 passing yards, 53% completion percentage, but still threw three passing touchdowns. So he was good for fantasy. This week he faces a Houston Texans defense on the road, and we talked about some over-unders last week, especially when it came to the Detroit Lions and their very low team total. Baker Mayfield's Buccaneers are 2.5-point underdogs at Houston with a team implied total of 20 points. Baker Mayfield's very touchdown dependent as a fantasy starting quarterback. It's hard to project a lot of touchdowns when your team's expected to score 20 points, so I'm sitting Baker Mayfield.
Are you sitting the receivers also, Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka?
I've got Mike Evans as a number 2 wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka as a number 3.
Should be interesting to see if those guys can get open, and maybe Derek Stingley takes away Mike Evans as he did last week when he was trying to shadow Devontae Adams. For me, I'm going to sit a couple of wide receivers as well, as you see on this list, 3 in particular. Zay Flowers, Keon Coleman, Michael Pittman. Also concerned about Patrick Mahomes taking on the Eagles, unless he gets that fourth quarter magic like we saw in the Super Bowl. But Ken Walker, another guy I would like to avoid as well. But let's start with Walker here, just because last week was miserable for this situation for him. Sharing time with Zach Charbonnet. Charbonnet played more snaps. Charbonnet had more carries. Charbonnet had more rushing yards. Now Walker did play more on passing down situations, had 3 catches on 3 targets, but only for 4 yards. So if he's on the wrong side of a timeshare, I know the Steelers' run defense looked miserable last week against Breece Hall. That hopefully will favor Charbonnet. Now maybe Walker gets going, could have been a 1-week thing, but we heard the narrative building toward the end of training camp that Walker not practicing with the foot injury, Charbonnet maybe taking on more of an opportunity. I'm going to sit Ken Walker if I can, and I would actually prefer Zach Charbonnet for this week and maybe moving forward over Ken Walker. I'm also going to stay away from Zay Flowers, Keon Coleman. 2 receivers coming off amazing games last week. Keon Coleman's a little easier to sit because last week, until that amazing fourth quarter rally, he wasn't as involved as we wanted to see, but fantastic finish. But now he's going to potentially get Sauce Gardner. Could be troubling for him. Zay Flowers, I think most people want to start him. I get it. He was awesome last week against Buffalo. Looked like the go-to guy for Lamar Jackson. His history against the Browns, not great. 4 career meetings, he's averaging just over 10 PPR points per game. Has not scored a touchdown in those 4 games. And you saw last week what the Browns were able to do to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They limited the production for both those guys, so I think it could be a little bit of a down game for Zay Flowers. He's not an outright sit when you would just say get away from him completely, but in 2 receiver leagues, I would not start Zay Flowers. 3 receiver leagues, much harder to sit somebody of his potential, so I would actually sit him for week number 2. Dave, let's take a look at your sits, and you're also staying away from another receiver who is expected to do great things this year.
And he didn't in week 1, and all we heard all training camp long was, wow, George Pickens is stepping it up in Dallas, and he's going to be a big-time target getter. And week 1 comes, and Dak Prescott's got to throw, and George Pickens doesn't get a lot of targets. He's in that same range as where you have Zay Flowers. He's a number 3 type of wide receiver. I would use him in a 3 receiver league, but in a 2 receiver league, yeah, I've got questions about what to expect from him, especially in a game that I think the Cowboys should be able to win handily.
I do think we see, you said this on our podcast today, CeeDee Lamb after the drops, a lot of attention, and no Micah McFadden for the Giants from their linebacker position. Jake Ferguson could have a big game as well, so maybe Pickens not getting the targets that we're hoping for. All right, that'll do it for us with our starts and sits for week number 2. Chris, back to you.
Great stuff, fellas. Thank you so much. Fantasy football today with those guys, with Adam Azer. Check it out. I'm sure you know about it by now, but if not, scan that QR code. It'll take you there wherever you listen to podcasts. Download and follow. You can also watch them on the YouTube page.